I strongly disagree with the people that say only invest what you can afford to lose. Because who can afford to lose anything, right? We are investing in order to make money, not in order to lose money. So what does it mean, invest what you can afford to lose? It has no meaning. A better way to phrase this is only invest up to the point where you are still able to make your monthly expenses, right? If you can meet your monthly expenses, everything is fine. Everything beyond that, in my opinion, should be invested. You should be invested as much as possible. You might still want to have your emergency fund. You might still want to have your 3 to 6 months stashed up in something that doesn't return too much, that has very little volatility. You might want to do this simply just as an insurance against losing your job, for example. But everything beyond that, in my opinion, should be invested. It does not make sense to have a lot of cash on the sidelines. It might even make sense to take out a loan to invest even more. Now, you don't want to put all of your eggs into one basket, and you don't want to all bet this on Dogecoin. But if you are well diversified across asset classes, having the money instead in cash is a massive, massive mistake. Because here's the problem. The global capitalistic system works against you. It works against the people that sell just labor. Over time, labor gets less and less expensive relative to capital. In other words, if you just simply keep your current job, your income is going to rise slower than the monetary expansion. Your income grows somewhere between 4 to 5% if you don't get promoted. 4 to 5% is roughly the income growth in the US over the last decades. But over the same time period, over the last 60, 70 years, the US money supply grew by roughly 7% per annum. So every year you're falling behind. Every year your labor is worth less relative to capital. It's getting harder and harder every year to buy that house. It's getting harder and harder every year to pay those education expenses, to pay the medical bills, etc. It's getting harder and harder for pretty much everything that's not deflationary in nature. Of course, it's going to be still easy to buy the TV because producing the TV is getting easier and easier over time. It's going to get harder and harder to buy the same fraction of the economy, be it via stocks, be it via property, etc. over time, simply because money expands faster than income. Thus, we have to invest as much as possible. And we want to beat monetary expansion with this, so we do have to take a little bit of risk as well. We might want to consider buying the Nasdaq 100 instead of just the S&P 500. We might consider buying some Bitcoin, maybe paired with some long-term government bonds to have it equaled out. We want to buy maybe some property, maybe some gold. We want to have different asset classes that have very low correlation to one another, that then the overall portfolio volatility goes down, but also that we can then take advantage of potential crashes, right? When suddenly property crashes or suddenly Bitcoin crashes, we've got all of those other different asset classes as well in our portfolio. We can potentially sell something that's currently very high and then buy the dip in the thing, whatever crashed. When you've got your purchasing power in cash, technically you're also investing, right? You have it only in cash of one country. If that country is doing poorly, then the purchasing power of that dollar relative to other countries is also going down. In the US, maybe people don't feel it that much. But if you are in a country that's not at the very top of the picking order, you will feel that, right? You will feel how the value of your currency goes down over time. And then it becomes harder and harder to buy those imported goods, right? To buy the imported car, etc.
Here's the problem with crypto YouTube. People promoting becoming degen or buying 100x coins. That's what gives clicks, but that's not what's going to bring you forward. I refuse to take money from centralized exchanges. I refuse to take money from crypto projects. I refuse to pump and dump a coin and filling up my pockets in the background. I don't do any of this. Instead, I share my knowledge in the form of tutorials in the premium membership. So that's content that won't do well on YouTube, but that builds up skill over time. You can also directly contact me over there. You can directly pick my brain. Feel free to check it out. TheBitcoinStrategy.com is the link.
So holding cash is an investment as well, right? You're investing in your own country, but the main thing that you're investing in is low volatility. It's being able to access your purchasing power very quickly with very little price volatility, at least relative to consumer goods. not necessarily relative to investments, right? Here's the problem. We have to learn about those kind of things, right? If we don't learn about investing whatsoever, then we are falling behind. We need to have some money in stocks, in property, in gold, in Bitcoin, etc. And ideally, you want to have roughly 1 year worth of income in those things. You don't just want to have it in the S&P 500. You don't just want to have it in short-term government bonds. You do want to take on some risk, but you can digest the risk if you simply just diversify across asset classes. You do have to do this though, unfortunately. Otherwise, every year, things get harder and harder. And if you've got already 1 year saved up in those different asset classes, you're at least over time doing somewhat better because your investments, if they are properly chosen, do tend to outperform monetary expansion. You do need to beat 7% per annum though, right? So this is the benchmark. If you're buying property, you need to use leverage, right? You need to have some kind of debt that's cheaper than 7% per annum. If you're buying stocks, you need to have an expected return that's more than 7% per annum. So it needs to be more risk on than just the S&P 500. If you're buying bonds, maybe right now it makes sense to buy the long-term government bonds because when interest rates go down, they will go up in price. So I don't think it makes sense to measure your wealth in US dollars or in your local currency because again, the local currency goes down over time. It makes more sense to measure this against something hard. And the question is, of course, what is that hard thing to measure against? Maybe it could be NASDAQ 100s. So you divide your current US dollar portfolio by the NASDAQ 100 price. Maybe it could be Bitcoin if you've got most of your money in Bitcoin. It could be anything that's hard, that's at least not going down in value over time. You could also, of course, simply just measure this against USM2, right? Then it gets a bit more technical, but you could simply just calculate how much dollars do you have relative to all of the dollars that are floating around. And if that's going up, then you're doing fine, right? Then you're long-term getting ahead. And so that's a problem with the only invest what you can afford to lose statement because it has a fiat-centric worldview in mind. You don't want to look just at fiat. Fiat only measures how much you can potentially buy in consumer goods. If other things besides consumer goods matter to you, medical expenses, education, house, whatever it is, right? All those things that are not just consumer goods that are deflationary, you have to measure against something that does not devalue over time. And only then you get a realistic picture. And only then you will feel over the years how you're actually earning less and less per year and how much you actually have to increase your income. And what potential steps to take, right? Take another side hustle, skill up, get a better skill, get more money for that better skill. Invest a lot because then the increases of your wealth will compensate for the decreases in your income. Don't worry about the short-term ups and downs, right? We are talking about wealth building. We are talking about the next 10, 20, 30 years. In over 30 years, pretty much any asset is going up. And that's because, again, the US dollar is going down. Any fiat currency is going down. It's wrong to say only invest what you can afford to lose. It's better to say invest as much as possible while ensuring not to get broke in the meantime. You want to survive the volatility, you want to be smart about your risk taking, but you do have to take risk. You do have to invest into volatile assets. Otherwise, every year, things will get harder for you. And that's unfortunately how it's for the vast majority of people. But that's the system we live in. We simply just have to play with the system as well as possible. That's at least how I personally approach this. If it's the first time here, feel free to subscribe. Feel free to also give this a like. It helps the channel grow. Feel free to also join our Telegram channel. There's a Telegram channel. Down below, there's a link. Looking forward to chatting with you. Cheers.